panel of 3 speakers, Mr. Will DuBose, Lieutenant Heather Golopovich, Ms. Sarah Rapoli, and we want to remind you to please be respectful of them and note that this subject is sensitive. These stories may be difficult to hear, so if at any time you're feeling affected, please know that you may remove yourself to see your school counselor. Thank you, and we hope you learn a lot from this presentation.
My name is Heather Golopovich. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, so I'm actually a proud graduate of Knolls High School, class of 1998. My maiden name is Jones, no relation to Jade, but hi, how are you? I've seen you forever. So what my job is I'm a police lieutenant in Morris Township, and I grew up in Denville, so on the Denville side of Morris Knolls. And as police officers, one of the things that we expect every day when we get ready for work is we put on our vest and we put on our gun and we put on all of our tools and we go out, and sometimes we're not sure whether or not that's going to be the last time we see our family. So I'm married and I have 4 children, so it can be a little stressful when that happens, but the last thing we think about is the fact that we're in danger when we're at home. And so my story today is to talk to you about a personal experience with my ex-husband. And when you think of a police officer being shot, you don't think about it being anything other on the job. But what ended up happening was on October 16, 2008, I had been asleep, and my ex-husband, who was also a police officer at the time, he came home and he was drunk, and he had an alcohol problem, still does have an alcohol problem. And he woke me up, and he was obviously intoxicated. And at that point, he started screaming at me, and I really didn't know what was going on. There was a lot of stress in our marriage at that time. We had 2 really young kids. My daughter was 20 months old, my son was 8 months old. We both worked full-time jobs, and we had just gotten a house, and he was under a lot of pressure at work. I was under a lot of pressure at work. And he had a drinking problem. And when he started screaming at me, he wasn't really making any sense, and I didn't know why he was mad, and I had already been asleep a couple hours. He worked what they call the afternoon shift, so he didn't get home sometimes till 11:30, 12:30 at night. And what ended up happening next was he started yelling, and he's like, "I'm done." So I followed behind him, and I was like, "What is going on?" And at that point, he started to scream at me and blame me for things, and he ended up punching me in the face. And for 4 hours, he beat me up. And when I say he beat me up, he headbutted me, he strangled me until I went unconscious and then came back. He took a knife and made me hold it to my wrist and told me that he was going to make it look like I killed it myself, so he didn't get in trouble for it. He had bit my face, said really degrading things, and it all seemed really surreal, but I went through that for about 4 hours, and it culminated with him striking me, and I was on the ground. And he was yelling at me, he's like, "You're gonna call out of work." And when he made me call out of work, I'm thinking, I'm supposed to be at work tomorrow, and now I'm out sick, and while I'm laying there, I'm thinking, this is gonna give him time to bury my body. And the reason I'm thinking that is because he had his gun in his waistband the whole time. So the little backstory to that is that about a year and a half earlier, my ex-husband had been home, and he had hit me. It was the first major incident while we were married, and he ended up grabbing a shotgun in the room and he held it to his chin, and I had to talk him down off the ledge, and I made him promise me that day that he'd never bring his gun home, and I got rid of all the shotguns, and I even left my weapon at home, so I didn't have mine at home. And when I saw him come home with his gun in his waistband, and after he was screaming at me and hitting me and kicking me and all these things, I just knew that something was going to happen. He was either going to kill me or he was going to kill himself. And my kids were asleep in the other room, and we're talking, in the middle of the night this was going on. So I call out of work, and I let the dispatcher know that I wasn't going to be in. And back then we didn't really have anything in place to have a safe word or something, so they knew. And so now I'm laying on the ground, and I see him take his gun out of his waistband. And he took a pillow and he put it against my head. And he's like, "Call your dad and say goodbye." And I was like, "I'm not going to do that." My dad was my best friend. He knew it. And so I refused at that point. That was the first time I wasn't like compliant with what was going on, because at that point I'm like, here it is. I'm, no more survival mode. Like, this is gonna be it. I'm not doing this. I'm not gonna let him have this one last thing. So he put the pillow down over my head, and he ended up taking the gun barrel and pushed it against the pillow against my head. And then I heard him rack around into the gun. And for those of you who don't know what that sounds like, I know exactly what that sounds like. I've been training with weapons for a few years as a police officer, so I could hear the click and I could hear the trigger start to pull, and then all of a sudden he just fell to the ground. And he fell asleep. Well, he passed out, drunk. And I lay there, and I was bruised, and I was bleeding, and I was really scared. And the entire time, everything was going on, he kept telling me that if I screamed or if I woke up the kids, that he'd kill all of us. And I can truthfully say that that was like the scariest point of my life till that point. I've seen a lot of crazy things as a cop. This was by far the worst. And, here I am, I'm supposed to be a police officer, and I'm supposed to be strong, and I'm supposed to not be in a relationship like this, and I'm supposed to know where my resources are, and I felt helpless. And, so many times domestic violence, which is what we call intimate partner violence, but it doesn't have to be. It could be adult brothers, adult sisters, but, it's one of the hardest things to talk about. And there's such a stereotype with everything that makes us a victim, no matter whether it's sexual assault, whether it's domestic violence, that I didn't seek help before. And I wasn't someone who was abused by my husband physically a lot. There was an incident on my honeymoon where we had been drinking. It was an all-inclusive honeymoon, and when we were walking back to our hotel room one night, he got mad all of a sudden and shoved me against the wall and said, "I could kill you down here and no one would find you." And I'd never seen that side of him before. And we kind of just went back to the hotel room, and the next morning he woke up and it was like nothing happened. I was like, all right, maybe he was just so drunk he doesn't remember it. And that was really it. And then, everything seemed to be okay because I got pregnant right away. And what you'll learn about people in relationships where they're controlling is they have their different things that make them feel like they're in control. And one of the things for him was when I was pregnant. It was like a sign that he owned me. So he was really great to me for like 9 months. Since I was a symbol, there wasn't a lot of violence. There was still controlling behavior. He was still checking my phone. He was still, giving me a hard time. As a police officer, we can be on calls for hours, whether it's a major motor vehicle crash or a suicide or even, a big investigation. And I would go back to my phone and there'd be like 15, 20, 30 text messages. Why aren't you calling me back? Who are you with? What are you doing? And it just, it all culminated that one night. And the next day was actually even harder because you finally are at this point where you're done. And then you think, how do I get out of this, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm on the floor and I have a ripped t-shirt and pants and I'm laying here and I'm like, how did this happen? Like, I'm not this person. My parents always taught me to stick up for myself. My parents' marriage was phenomenal. They were such great role models when it comes to what a healthy relationship is supposed to look like. And here I was embarrassed and scared and not knowing what I was going to do. The difference between my job and most people's jobs is I have to worry about losing my job for something like this. And it was his word against mine with anything else that had happened. And so while I was laying there and he was passed out, I was just trying to think of what I was going to do, and I was still scared that if he woke up that he would still either continue to hurt me or he would then kill me. Horribly enough, I was laying there hoping he would kill himself, and just worried with my son in the next room, my daughter in the next room, that, if he shot his gun, it would hit them. It was just a lot. And the next morning he woke up and I woke up and he was sober-ish, and he ended up, he's like, are we gonna be okay? And I was like, I'm gonna be just fine. And I was like, well, we're home and now I have to think how to get out of this, right? And I said, I need to take our son to the doctor. He's not feeling well. He's like, I'll take him to the doctor. So I'm like, great, now my son's in danger if I call the cops. So I'm like, let me just call our pediatrician and see if she'll call in a medication. And so she did. And I was like, I'm supposed to be working the next couple of days, you're supposed to be working, we don't have any food in the house, I need to go to the grocery store. And he's like, I'll go to the grocery store. I'm like, all right, perfect. So I made him a whole list of groceries, a bunch of things I knew he wouldn't be able to find, so it took him longer. And as soon as he's like, what are you gonna do? And I'm like, I'm gonna take a shower. I need to clean up, I need to clear my head. And he's like, okay. So when he left, he took my keys. So I was stuck there. And I didn't live in Denville, I didn't live in Rockaway, I lived out in Sussex County where we don't even have a police department. The state police patrol our neighborhoods. And I made a call to the state police dispatcher, I called 911. I hung up 5 times before I talked to that dispatcher. And on the 5th time I said, I still even downplayed it. I said, listen ma'am, I'm like, both me and my husband are cops and we had a really bad fight last night. I just need somebody to come to the house. And then he started text messaging me. What are you doing? Why aren't you picking up? What's going on? I'm leaving the store early. I'll leave everything here if you don't answer me. You know, he's panicking and I can see it. And I know that the grocery store is about 20 minutes away. So now I start panicking on the phone with the dispatcher. And the dispatcher's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And I was like, he's coming here. If someone doesn't come here, I'm like, you know, it was really bad. I haven't told you everything. We're both cops. I don't know where his gun is. I've already looked. And what she did next was she saved my life. Instead of sending the police to my house, she sent them to the ShopRite. And she waited, and there were 6 or 7 cops standing outside when my ex-husband walked out with a grocery cart full of diapers and milk and all this stuff. And when he saw the cops walking towards the store, he stopped, he turned around and he put his hands up in the air like this, without anything being said. And that was actually pretty key that the troopers wrote that down in their report because it's a sign of guilt. And what ended up happening after that was the troopers actually brought all our groceries back to the house for us. And I made a call to my father and I said, I need you to come get the kids. I need to go get a restraining order. And then I went and I called my captain. And funny enough, the only thing I was worried about was letting him know that my gun was not at the house and I wasn't at fault, right? Because here I am, I'm thinking, my husband's about to get arrested and he's another source of income, right? How am I gonna take care of 2 kids by myself? I'm a new cop. How am I gonna go to work and have these guys think I'm this weak to let this happen to myself? Right, so this whole time, I'm re-victimizing myself with the thoughts that are going through my head. And I'm not realizing that I did nothing wrong. And this happened to me, not because of me. And it's taken a really long time to actually get there. But I think that I'm lucky to have grown up with who I grew up with because I don't know if I could have walked away. And I can tell you right now, if I hadn't walked away that day, I would most likely be dead. My ex-husband is an alcoholic. He still does things to try to control me. There isn't a time that I drop off my kids to him that I don't have my gun on me because I'm scared something might happen. And when it was all said and done, I was able to get a restraining order and he was charged. He went to jail, and because he was an alcoholic, the judge felt that if he was going to be released on bail, which we had back then, we don't have it anymore, that he would have to go through an intense screening, and then he would have to go to a rehabilitation center for alcoholism for 28 days. So my ex-husband, who basically tried to kill me, went to jail for 2 weeks, and then was released to a rehab for 28 days. He was not supposed to have any contact with me, but because of the fact that he felt he could still control me, he sent me letters almost every single day. And the letters said things like, I'm so sorry, you didn't do anything wrong, I shouldn't have done this, I have a problem, lies after lies, trying to win me back. And I handed them over to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor held on to them instead of charging him. And he was released, and when he was released, right after Thanksgiving, he gets his parents to call me to see when he could see his kids. And I was like, no, that's not happening. I ended up being forced to let him see my kids. And they were, like I said, they were both under 2, so they can't communicate with you when something's going on. And he was out on bail until the trial, which was in 2010. So in 2009, he went before what's called a grand jury. A grand jury is a group of peers that decide whether or not there's enough evidence and material to move forward with a formal trial. And he ended up testifying for himself, which never happens. Defendants do not testify on their own behalf. And his original charges were aggravated assault, 2 of them, aggravated assault with a weapon, 2 charges, possession of a weapon for unlawful purposes, criminal restraint, which means he didn't let me leave, harassment and terroristic threats. When he went into the grand jury, he told the grand jury that he tried to leave because he found out I was cheating on him, and that I wouldn't let him leave, so he pushed me, and that's where all my injuries came from. At that time, the prosecutor handed over all the letters that my ex-husband had written me while he was in rehab, and the jury turned around and charged him with kidnapping and 3 counts of perjury for lying during grand jury. My ex-husband was facing 75 years in jail, and he did 2 months in 1 week. And he's out, and he's free. And I sleep with my gun next to my bed every night, because people who go that far don't know how to stop. And I really think it's important as a police officer, also from your community, to stand up here and let you know that this kind of stuff does happen to everybody. It might not happen to you, but it might happen to someone you know. It most realistically will happen to someone you know. It may be happening with your parents. And it's a really hard thing to deal with, and it's really embarrassing, and it's extremely personal. But at the same time, I know the only real power that I'm drawing from what happened to me is by being able to help other people telling them my story, to let them know that I'm someone that you can talk to. I'm someone who's been through it. I've been through both ends of it. Victims come into my police department and they're like, you don't know what I'm going through. They look at my guys and they're like, you can't relate, you're a guy, because most of the time it's women, although there are a lot of men that are victims of domestic violence. They just don't want to come forward and make it seem like they're weaker because they allow it to happen. I'm blessed to be able to have the opportunity to say I know exactly what you're going through. And not only do I know what you're going through because I've been through it, but I've also survived it. And I spent the last 11 years really building up my self-image and my self-worth. It was really hard to go back to work with a bunch of guys and say, hey, I can protect you even though I couldn't protect myself, and have them look at me and have that faith in me. It was very awkward conversations that they still have not had to this day with me about how they felt guilty because they saw the signs before I did, and here I was thinking that I was this great show, not telling anybody how hard it was at home. But what I take from all of it is that we don't necessarily control our own circumstances. However, we always are in control of how we react and how we grow and who we become afterwards and who we're there to help. And I feel grateful for the opportunity. I'm extremely grateful to be back here at Morris Knolls, to be able to talk to all of you, because as I was telling someone right before I started talking, when I was at Morris Knolls, we had this guy come in who killed someone in a DWI crash, and he was driving while intoxicated, killed someone who was a public speaker, and I remember sitting right about there. And I looked up at him and I said, oh my gosh, this is so impactful. I hope someday that I can be that impactful on people. And here I am with the opportunity to be back here in front of you guys. In a different light. I never thought I was going to be a police officer when I was in high school. I love my job. I love being a cop, I love helping people, but I really love the aspect of the personal story that I can bring to it to help more and more people. Because as a police officer, we see people on their worst days, and the most amount of calls we get in Morris Township are domestic violence calls, unfortunately. So I thank you guys for being such a good audience, and I am going to pass it over to my very good friend, Sarah.
Hi, so my name is Sarah, and I am the founder of the clothing company, Angel Energy, which I'm wearing a shirt right now. We're a domestic violence awareness-based clothing line, and we donate 25% of our proceeds each month to a different domestic violence charity. So my experience with domestic violence is a little bit different in that it wasn't direct, rather I was the child living in a house with severe domestic violence. So just a little bit of a background on my parents. So they met through work. My mom was a nutritionist and my dad worked in the health department in South Jersey, and they met there. And of course, at first he was really charming, and they started to date, and she didn't know at the time that he was actually married. So finally, that came out, and he decided to leave his wife essentially for my mom. So obviously, at first, everything was really great, and they got married in 1986, and then things started to escalate really badly. So before my mom was in a relationship where he also was a domestic abuser. Obviously, my mom didn't know that, but it started coming out with her. So he was very controlling, verbally abusive, and then it got to the point where he started making threats and became physically abusive and financially abusive, and she was very, very fearful for her life. So from the outside looking in, because my parents both were really successful and had great jobs, and we lived in a really nice house. I'm an only child, so it just looked like a picture-perfect family, but inside what was going on was very scary. And even though I was younger at the time, as a kid, you still know what's going on. And there's some very vivid incidents I remember. Like there was this one time I was sleeping. My mom, I guess, fell asleep reading to me in my bed, and in the middle of the night, my dad came in and just grabbed her by her hair and just like ripped her out of my bed and dragged her down the hall. I also remember him like throwing a toaster at her. I remember direct threats being made, him emotionally abusing her. One time she was crying and he was saying like a monkey when you cry, and it was just very, very bad, to the point where, and he would also even make threats in front of me to her, like I'm gonna kill your whole family, I'm gonna cut your head off, like just crazy things. It was about 1996, so I was 3 at the time, and my mom had kept this a secret from everyone at work. Like no one, she was so successful and so happy and bubbly and professional, like it was very, very not obvious. So she finally decided to confide in her best friend and kind of told her what was going on, and at that point, started to plan her escape. Now it took a while. My dad was very manipulative and very controlling and very smart, and so she had to be very careful with how she went about it. So it was March of 1999. At this point, I was 6 years old, and I was just sitting in class. I was in first grade, and it was a couple hours after I got to school, and the teacher said, "Your mom's here for early dismissal," and I was kind of confused of why am I leaving? I just got here. My mom was really planning to run away with me that day, and obviously didn't tell me because I was younger, but she pretended like she was going to work and then came right from school and went to Florida. So her parents lived in South Jersey as well, but had a winter home in Florida, so we went to my grandparents. We didn't have anything with us, obviously we didn't pack, so we didn't have clothes or anything, so we just bought everything when we were there. And even though I was younger being there, I do remember my mom being on the phone a lot there with her lawyer, also my dad, talking to my grandparents, and my mom's lawyer advised her to come back because if she wanted custody over me, it wouldn't look good if she had kind of run away with me to Florida. So we came back after only 3 days and stayed at my grandparents' house in South Jersey. So during that time period, my mom still had not gone back to the house. I was going back and forth. I spent some weekends at my dad's, and I just didn't like being there. I feared him, and I think that's kind of what he instilled in me, just fear, and he liked to kind of instill that into everyone because it was just his way of having power. And I even knew then that I just didn't want to be around him. I don't remember saying this, but my mom's friend told me that I guess I had said to her, why would I want to live with Daddy? He's so mean to you, when she told me what was going on. So, I was very aware of how he was. So, on April 7th of 1999, my mom had a custody battle with my dad for me and had won temporary custody over me. So, since she had not been back to the house, since we went to Florida, she had to go back and get her things, her clothes, her shoes, everything. So she had asked in front of lawyers and everyone at the court, when can she come back to get her things? And he said that she could come back tomorrow, April 8th, that it would be supervised, I would be there, and his dad would be there. So I just remember my mom, we borrowed my grandpa's minivan and went over and met my pop-up there. And me and my pop-up were just sitting downstairs on the couch in the family room, and my mom was going up and down the stairs carrying boxes and bags of things to her car. And when she went up, the last time that she went up, and my pop-up is sound asleep at this point, I just heard her scream, "Frank, no," and then this really loud sound that sounded like two bricks slamming together is the only way I can really describe it, and he had murdered her. And I knew something was wrong. My dad didn't come down right away. My pop-up was still sound asleep. And I sat there and I was so anxious, and I knew something wasn't right. And then finally my dad came down, got my pop-up, brought him upstairs to kind of show him, what he had done. And my pop-up was like, "Come on," came back down, "Sarah, we have to leave." And I was like, "What's going on? I want to see mommy." And I tried to go up the stairs to see her. My dad was kind of blocking the stairs and said, "She's resting right now. We were moving furniture." And my dad's dad was like, "Come on, we have to go." So I finally agreed, and we got in the car, and my pop-up just told me, "Your mom's in heaven now." And I didn't really process what that meant for a really long time. I mean, I obviously knew what had happened, but I didn't allow myself to process those emotions for a while. And it was about the time, I think probably when I was 23, when my grandpa, so my mom's dad, passed away, is when I started to kind of process death in general and just realize the importance of life and the things that matter. And then in the summer of 2018, I started a fashion blog, and I was doing a lot of blogging on my personal blog and on Instagram, and just talking about my life and every aspect of it, but no one knew my story, and I had actually kept it a secret for my whole adolescence. I went to college, and none of my friends knew, no one knew. So I felt that it was about a year ago, in January of 2019, that I decided, I'm going to just tell my story, because even if the numbers are small, I know that someone else can relate to this. There's someone else, another girl or boy, who have dealt with that type of situation, who grew up in a house like I have, and maybe my story could help them. And I think the most important thing to do to be preventative is just to really recognize the signs of abuse early on in dating, so it doesn't get to that point, and to really know the difference between someone who's being mean and someone who's being verbally abusive or emotionally abusive. So I was reading this book on domestic abuse recently, and they talked about the power and control wheel, and it's 8 ways an abuser can maintain power and control. And I think a lot of this is what my dad did, not only to my mom, but even to me in a sense. So fear is one of them, the emotional abuse, isolation, denial, blame, using children, bullying, financial control, and just the verbal threats. So if anyone is ever experiencing any of those in their relationship, even if it's to the smallest degree of isolation, your boyfriend doesn't want you to hang out with other friends and only just be you guys, or whatever it is, the emotional abuse, he's being a little bit more than just mean, it's important to take those signs very, very seriously, so you can avoid things escalating to the point of potentially your life being at risk. And although all of this has happened, and that was my childhood, I have to say that the rest of my life turned out pretty great. And I like to think that my mom was watching down on me and making things go my way, but I know that I owe a lot of the credit to myself, because I persevered, and I continue to persevere every day. And my way of healing is just to raise domestic violence awareness, dating abuse awareness, in hopes to save someone else. And my message to you all is just, no matter what happens in life, you are the one that's in control of your own story, and you can determine how you want to live your life. Thank you.
My name is Will DeBose, and I'm the prevention coordinator for the New Jersey Coalition to End Domestic Violence. I work for the state coalition, and my responsibility is to engage men and boys in the work as allies to end domestic violence, as well as to address teen dating violence awareness. How many of you knew that this month is teen dating violence awareness? How many knew that? Raise your hands. Oh boy. It's important for you to understand that we're here. I'm going to take this microphone out because I'm tall and I don't want to hunch over. Is that okay? Is that okay? Okay, thank you. It's a very important subject matter that that you young folks need to be aware of, because teen dating violence awareness, teen dating violence is a very real issue. Many of you right now are discovering who you are. You're walking through life. You're looking at high school as as an opportunity. Some of you, how many of you enjoy going to school? Wow, we got one hand, one proud hand, and she's waving it too. This is a very odd time for you in life. Or maybe we got two hands. Okay, there we got two hands. But this is a very challenging time in life for you. There's a lot of different social things that you're facing, and some of you are getting involved in relationships. You're seeing someone that you may potentially want to get involved with, and you're making those love connections. But with that comes a lot of issues. There comes a lot of things. When two individuals get together in a relationship, you're coming to the table, and each one of you has. You're having things that you're going through in your lives. Each one of you has a household that you're living in daily, and some of your households are not the most healthiest situations, things that are going on there. You might be witnessing things in your household that you're not sharing with anyone. And that could be happening on either side. And our main focus here today is to give you an opportunity to feel like you can be heard, that you can speak to someone. For 16 years, I've worked with men who've caused harm. And a lot of the stories that I've heard throughout the years is a lot of the abuse that they began to perpetrate as adults. There were attitudes and beliefs that were developed when they were younger. There was messaging that was heard, while they were young men and young boys, messaging that was heard that collectively has created this person that's an adult. And so for me, as doing prevention work, it's very important for me to communicate a message to you today and the same message that the ladies have communicated as well, is that you have an opportunity right now at this age to really make a difference as to what your future is going to look like. Right now you're in school and you're learning a lot about history, science, math, English. I heard the beautiful chorus singing over here earlier today, so you're learning your craft and some different skills, and you're envisioning what you want your future to look like. If you're an upperclassman, you're starting to think about college and what that's going to look like. But one of the biggest things that we often underestimate when we were your age is just the impact of what a relationship can do to your life. And how not understanding some of the things that may be happening to you, some of the things that you may be subjecting someone to, or you're being subjected to, how that affects you as an individual, we really underestimate that.
Thank you for being a respectful audience, and thank you to our speakers for being so brave to share your experiences. We have 20 minutes for a question and answer session. If you have a question, raise your hand and one of the Teen Leadership Council members will bring you a microphone. Feel free to sit or stand when you present your question. If you have a personal question that you would like to hold until the end of this group session, we may have some time at the end of the group session for you to ask it.
So abuse is abuse. It doesn't matter how it comes at you or who it's coming from, it's just wrong. And it's just how it gets dealt with afterwards, right? So I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, neither are my two friends here. In the definition of those terms, how they are, it's all the same. It's just the way they treat people is wrong, right? And the way that they approach you is wrong. So the difference between what it is still the same result, if that makes sense. Okay.
And I just want to say to that a lot of what we exhibit, a lot of what you exhibit right now is learned behavior. So a lot of what you may be modeling right now or things that you've seen, things that you've experienced. And so I don't want to, I don't want to make it so, such a huge idea. A lot of really, honestly, it's a lot of social modeling. So we're really honestly trying to help you to take a look at right now what it is that's maybe being modeled for you, so that you're aware of it, and so that you can change those behaviors. Because the older you get, the harder it is once you've been conditioned and once you've been operating in a certain way, it's harder for you to get out of those behaviors. So the focus really honestly is what we want you to take a look at right now. I'm gonna say, I really honestly, I think the emotional piece is one of the biggest pieces, because that's where it starts. You know, for me, working 16 years with men who've caused harm, when an individual, we're talking, let's just say for the sake of example, when we're talking a male meeting a female, okay? So when a male meets a female, and this male has a tendency to be abusive, he's not going to meet you and tell you that he's going to abuse you. Okay, it doesn't start out that way. It starts off very, very nice. It starts off very easy. It's not just right in your face. So I say one of the biggest things for me, you ask one of the most powerful, is it's the manipulation, it's the emotional manipulation, the idea of getting the female partner to believe that they're genuinely interested in everything about them, but actually it's a tactic to begin to control and dominate that person's life. I think today, as technology is evolving, a lot of it, what we were seeing traditionally, right? Traditionally, we were seeing face-to-face, but as technology has grown, we are seeing that social media, technology, period, is being used. I mean, I've heard of cases where Alexas have been used in cases with regards to domestic violence cases. So technology is definitely something that is being used by those who cause harm as a tactic. But a lot of what I had seen earlier on in my career was face-to-face, but once again, there's been an evolution to that.
I'm gonna answer that from a police standpoint. So yeah, especially in like the teen dating sense, right? So you're a Snapchat. Go ahead, it's cool. I get Snapchat, I love it, right? So we'll just go off of that, right? It's pretty cool because things get erased. So what we're seeing a lot of, and what people aren't really classifying as something that's domestic related, is two people end up liking each other. You get the whole, oh yeah, send me a picture of you in your underwear, right? You guys can giggle if you need to, but we're gonna talk about something that you know happens, because you've seen it happen. Because I see it happen every day at the high school in our town. Officer Mike can attest to this as well. And you're like, and you're like, nah, I don't want to do that. And the other person's like, come on, it's the same thing as you being in your bikini that you posted on Instagram, right? It's the same thing, send it to me. And you're like, you know what, yeah, okay, that makes sense, no problem. I like him, I like her, no problem, right? I love him, I can trust him, whatever. And he's gonna make me feel beautiful, or I'm gonna feel better about myself. So then they're like, yeah, thank you so much. And then it goes on and they're like, oh yeah, well, send me now with your bra off. And you're like, no, I'm not doing that. And then I use he and she, I apologize, because it's what we see the most, but it does happen vice versa. So the guy's like, well, if you don't, I'm gonna tell your parents that you sent this to me, and they're not gonna be happy that you're sending pictures in your underwear. And you're like, well, crap, what do I do, right? I don't feel good enough going to my parents, because they are gonna get mad at me. I can't tell a teacher. Sometimes it's ingrained into our minds that if we send photos as a person under the age of 18, that maybe that's child pornography, right? Do you guys even think about that? Like being under 18 and taking pictures of yourself that are in a sexually explicit manner? That's producing, distributing, and being in possession of child pornography. So there's that concern, again, as a victim of somebody who's now going through sextortion, that it can be used against you, when really now you need help. And then it escalates. And then you start getting stuck in a pattern where things are being used against you in a controlling manner through a cyber situation to make you do things that you might not want to do. And that's all part of domestic violence, right? So as far as what we're seeing both ways, I mean, it really just depends on where you are. I get calls every single day from people who are having assaults at their house between a spouse or, you know, a parent and a, you know, an older child or whatever. But we're also still seeing the cyber element come in for people who are going through a divorce, through a separation. They're putting spyware on their phones. They're setting up indoor cameras that they're not aware of. They're hacking into people's emails and following and controlling. So as far as abuse goes, unfortunately, the police are seeing it when it's at its worst, when someone needs help, when they feel like they can't get out. So we're seeing the bad cases, but we're also seeing the cyber element just grow even more.
And just the last little caveat to that, even though you delete it, it still stays in the internet world. So images are going somewhere. It's very hard to get an image off the internet completely. So I just I'm not trying to make you afraid, but maybe I am trying to make you afraid. Okay, I'm trying to warn you that, you know, just because you deleted it off the app or you deleted it off your phone or what have you, if you posted it on the internet, it's in the internet world somewhere.
You know, funny, you don't really see red flags until you look back. I always say hindsight's 20/20, right? So when you're in it, it feels like it's a singular moment. And when you look back at all the things, it becomes more holistic. Obviously the honeymoon was pretty big, right? He pushed me against a wall and said he could kill me. So that's great. That's my honeymoon memory with my ex-husband. And I think I just let that get pushed back thinking that it was because of alcohol, right? We all have that one friend or one person that you know that like drinks too much and they're just the person you don't want to know, right? It could be a parent, it could be an uncle, it could be whatever. And so I just kind of assumed that, and then it just kept building, and it was little things, right? Like the same thing, controlling, always checking my text messages, and I was in a situation where I was married, and I felt like I had this commitment, and I would have been the first person in my family to get divorced. It's kind of common now, but it wasn't, you know, and I'm not that old, but it wasn't that prevalent back then. And, you know, I didn't want to ask for help and I didn't want to be embarrassed, so I let a lot of the little things go, and all the little things grew into something big. So, the whole incident where my ex-husband held the shotgun to his chin, he had pushed me against a wall and held my neck against the wall and started to strangle me, and I had marks on my neck. And I was in such survival mode that I, you know, went and tried to save him because now he was in the room and I didn't have my son yet, I only had my daughter. And he had a shotgun to his head, and what do we do as police officers? We want to help people, right? So I wanted to help him. I loved him. That was what was going through my mind. And he started to tell me all these things and said he's a horrible person. And so he actually changed after that night. He said, you know, change. And he actually called for help to get some counseling, and I thought things were moving in the right direction. He stopped drinking. Little did I know my ex-husband never stopped drinking. He would get alcohol on the way home from work after getting off his shift, and he was hiding the empty alcohol bottles in the insulation in our outdoor garage, so I wouldn't see them in the recycling and know he was drinking. And, you know, I got called into my captain's office. I called in my captain's office, and he goes, "There's marks on your neck, and they look like there's strangulation marks. What happened?" And that's how he said it. So it's kind of like, oh gosh, right? I'm like, oh my God, I'm caught. But I didn't say anything. I said, oh, I fell. Stupid, right? Like, that's the typical thing you think people say when they're trying to get out of not being a victim. But I was worried. I wasn't ready to come forward. It was my personal journey. I was really scared of everything that was going to happen to me, when really I should have worried about what was going to happen to me if I stayed. I just wasn't there yet. So, you know, look back, there's a million little red flags. Like I say, hindsight's 20/20, but pulling it all together now, like I see it, it's easier to see it now. It just wasn't then when you're in it, because it's really bad for a little bit, but then it's really good. And it's so much easier for us to see good in other people, right? Or want to see good in other people, want to hope that we picked the right person, we made the right choice, we allowed someone to love us that's good for us. And to be wrong about that is a whole other element of being a victim.
So that was actually the last time I saw him that day. He ended up getting off very easily. He only went to jail for 15 years, and he's out now, like, totally free. I don't speak with him, I don't have any type of relationship with him, but that was the last time I saw him, was that day.
I would tell them that they needed to talk to someone. I think that's one of the biggest things. If I could just speak to the young men in the room today, that we get a lot of messages you know, I know you look at me as like, oh, okay, this is the old guy talking here, but the thing about messaging is that it doesn't matter how old an individual is, the messaging still stays the same. And so there's a lot of messaging that gets taught to us as young men and as boys, and a lot of the messaging is unhealthy. And so what I would suggest to advocate for someone who's perpetrating, if it be a young male in this, I would suggest that you would try to help them talk to a counselor, that you would really try to encourage them and be supportive of them. And I know that sounds a little bit maybe contradictory because we're talking about someone who's perpetrating abuse, but they're going through their process as well too. And so sometimes in an effort to help people, sometimes we can scare them off by the way that we're addressing them, but if we understand that, you know, that they might be getting these messages from somewhere, maybe they're getting a message from home, and this is what's going on in their lives and they're acting it out that way, trying to be supportive of them, you know, trying to be supportive to help them get the help that they need is the best way to go about it. So once again, I just want to say to the young men and boys, really honestly, there's a lot of messaging that we're getting today. A lot of messaging that you're getting on a daily basis. How many of you have a smartphone? You all raised your hands on that one, right? You realize how much influence is coming through this phone. If you're on one form of social media, you're getting hit every time you pick up the phone to take a look at your social media. There's constant messaging, and specifically there's messaging that's very unhealthy that's coming as maybe that's my timing. I'm supposed to be getting off. It's trying to cut me off, but I just want to challenge you to really be aware of yourselves, be aware of the messaging that's coming to you, and to make your own decisions.
It's not easy, right? So the system that I vowed to uphold, right, when I became a sworn law enforcement officer, is something that I really felt would also protect me. And the court system didn't, unfortunately. So when my ex-husband was sentenced, he took a plea deal for 6 months. He was facing 75 years in jail. And he took a plea deal for 6 months, so with good time. He did 2 months and 1 week. And as soon as he was out, he called me and he said, I want to see my kids. And then we went through a divorce, because it's not easy to have somebody come to a divorce trial when they're in jail. And the judge, a female judge, told me that when it came to our children, she couldn't hold him accountable for what he did to me when it came to his relationship with them. She said what he did was to me and it had no effect on them. And so I was forced to enter into an agreement where he gets to see them every other weekend. And when they were littler, he had more time because they weren't in school, so he got them every Wednesday, every other Thursday. And things have happened to them, and it's never risen enough for anything to happen. The unfortunate problem also with being a police officer is I cannot violate a civil order or I will lose my job. So people who aren't cops can not follow a child custody order and only have to deal with the ramifications of that in court. I would have to deal with that on a criminal level, and I could lose my job. So I have to allow them to go. They've been in counseling, I've been in counseling. My son actually found out about it. He just turned 12, my daughter's now 13. My son found out about it because I responded to a murder-suicide, and a guy who had been dating a girl ended up shooting her 10 times in Morris Plains. Ran over across the street, which borders Morris Township, and then ended up shooting himself when I was in pursuit with him, with 2 other cops. And when I went back to look at the girl, who was obviously dead when we showed up, even though we came after, I was standing there, and a lieutenant from Morris Plains, who's a really good friend of mine, said, he swore, and I was like, what's wrong, Mike? And he's like, that's someone's daughter, and out of my mouth goes, that could have been me. And I've never had that issue at work. I've never had anything transfer over. I've never had anything come through, and at that moment I realized, this affects me on a deeper level. So I went and I was talking to my husband now, and my son must have overheard something that he wasn't supposed to and kind of just started, he's like, is that what happened between you and Dad? And I didn't answer. And I was like shocked. And he's like, it did, didn't it? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he went and he searched it on the internet. And the victim's information is always classified. That's never going to be posted. But it's not hard for him to look up his dad's name and put it with ex-cop from whatever town he was from, right? And so he wouldn't see his father for months. And the court still pushed me, even after counseling, to make for reunification so he could have a relationship with his father. So now he goes because his father makes him feel guilty. And that's a whole nother set. And my daughter doesn't know, she doesn't want to know, she just knows something happened, but when she's ready to know, I'll talk to her about it. You know, I want their father to be healthy. That's the other side of this. Like, I want them to not have an issue having a relationship with him because I want him to be healthy, he's just not. And I can't control that. The only thing I can do is be a good model of what a healthy relationship is for them now. So when they come home and they're with me, most of the time, they'll know what to emulate when they're older.
Yes. I think what happens is a lot of times is the media, all the different platforms, when you're talking about media, when you're talking about magazines, when you're talking about television, when you're talking about internet, all different types of media, what they do is they support an idea. They give you an image they give us all an image as to what, what the expectations of life are supposed to be. And I think a lot of times what happens is that these messages, when you watch certain commercials on television, there's certain messaging that's coming across that's supporting an idea that's unhealthy. Okay, so when you're looking at things, you have to really be mindful of just how it's impacting me. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever gotten on a form of social media and you weren't even thinking about food, but you saw something that was being done on social media, somebody was making food, and all of a sudden you got hungry? Yeah, I'm gonna raise my hand and put up 2 feet as well too. Okay, so you weren't even hungry when you were looking before you got on your phone, you weren't even thinking about food. But then all of a sudden you saw that food being made on your social media, and then all of a sudden you got hungry. Do you see the influence? So if you're being influenced to think about food, what other messages do you think are coming across that phone to influence you about body shaming and how you look at your body? Or how you think about yourself as a male or a female, or how you think about relationships, or how you think about a lot of different subject matters. So definitely all forms of media are definitely influencing and shaping the way that we look at ourselves as a society. Can I ask you a question? How many of you know someone who's in an unhealthy relationship right now? I mean, how many of you are going to honestly answer that you know someone who's in an unhealthy relationship right now? Raise the hands. Okay. The reason why I ask you that is because there is help. You can talk to your counselors about that. If it's you can definitely talk to someone. If it's you who are looking to advocate for someone, there's definitely help. And just as Heather had mentioned, that it's not, the degrees of separation are very small. And you have an opportunity to really, really, really make a difference in someone's lives. So that's why I wanted you to say that you have a voice and that you can use it, because I know that there's more of you in here that didn't raise your hand that know someone, or you yourself are in an unhealthy relationship, and that you can speak out about it. I just want to give you that confidence to know that today. And so I want you to just participate with me for a minute. And is that okay? Can you participate with me for a minute? Oh man, you can't even say yes. We're in trouble. Are you good? Are you with me? Are you with me? I want to hear you say, I have a voice. 1, 2, 3. I have a voice. Thank you. Okay, now I need one more piece. There's one more piece to that. Because you can have a voice. You can definitely have a voice. But if you don't use your voice, then what is the point? Okay, so we're going to put them together. So we're going to say the second piece, so I can use my voice. All right, and then we're going to put them together. So 1, 2, 3, I can use my voice. 1, 2, 3. I can use my voice. All right, so now we're going to put them together. I have a voice, and I can use my voice. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Now I want you to remember that. I want you to remember that. When you're facing situations, when you're going through times, or when you're going through rough times, or where you're in a relationship, or you're witnessing someone in a relationship that's unhealthy, I want you to remember that you have a voice and that you can use your voice. Thank you.
This is the end of our presentation. Thank you again for being such a wonderful audience. And can we just give another round of applause to our speakers?